This is Suzanne Meriden speaking to you from the US. Of course, I am with the Syrian American Council and working with a dear friend and activist, Ali Reza, who helps bring this call to all of you Monday morning, just so that we can hear the voices directly from inside Ghouta. And this morning is a distressful morning, just like any conversation we've had over the past few weeks, months, years even. If you were on last week, you recall that we tried to talk to our dear friends inside Ghouta, and unfortunately we couldn't, because simply because they were under bombardment and they couldn't connect to us, and they had to, someone had just actually had their house bombed, and so they were trying to save their family, and so we couldn't speak to them last week. This week is not any different. We do have our guests that are connecting with us, but before we speak to them, and actually I have to tell you, we speak to them from darkness today. They are without any light. Of course, because the regime has cut out not only food and medicine, but electricity. They are under complete besiegement and have been for the past 6 years. But I did want to share some news. You may have heard, of course, through social media, a frequent guest who comes on and talks to us, Mr. Belal Kharpotly. His brother passed away yesterday or the day before, unfortunately, due to the bombardment by the Assad regime and the Russian regime, as well as the Iranian militias. So very unfortunate and sad. However, we are adamant to bring you this news weekly, to make sure we are in touch with people inside, to make sure their stories and voices come through to us until we help somehow to free them from this hell they're living in. And I use these words that are their own words, not ours, certainly. So one thing to mention is this morning a convoy did enter Ghouta, and that was a UN convoy in partnership with Russian regime, supposedly, but the convoy was supposed to bring in food, medicine, other needs, but apparently medicinal needs and supplies were actually confiscated by the Assad regime and by the Russian regime. So once again, we ask the United Nations, what is it exactly they're doing? What is their role? They simply are not doing their role, because any decisions that have been made, whether ceasefires, whether it's convoys entering Eastern Ghouta, simply nothing is being followed up upon, or nothing is following through. And so we question what the UN credibility is, and we wonder. Yesterday, a famous picture made the rounds on Twitter and on Facebook and all of social media. We saw two children wrapped in the shrouds that are labeled UN, body bags, basically. And unfortunately, it seems that is the only outcome we've seen from the United Nations at this point. So we hope for more, we ask for more, and that's why we need everyone's help to continue getting the voices of our friends from Eastern Ghouta. So this morning we should have with us Dr. Sakhar. I'm sorry, I know we're having some technical issues here, but Dr. Sakhar or Nour, Adam, are you with me? We might have lost the connection again. We're going to give it a few seconds and see if we can get them back on. You can imagine they're constantly having trouble with either internet connections, light. I mean, they've just come on here for a second and I saw them sitting in the darkness. In the past few weeks, we have been able to at least keep some sort of conversation, but it seems every Monday when we try to do so, it becomes more challenging and it becomes more difficult. So give me 1 second here. Let me check and see if we have any information. Reconnect. We had tested and connected with them. Everything appeared to be okay, but then we lost them, and then we had them again as soon as we connected with all of you. And unfortunately, we lost them again. I cannot imagine what it feels like to be in their shoes. I know there was a showing Ghouta from far away and the darkness that Ghouta is. You could make up the skyline, and right behind eastern Ghouta was Damascus, shining in its glory and its lighting. And unfortunately, that's what the the Syrian regime does, illuminates the city where its backers and its supporters supposedly are. Many are supporters just pretending to be supporters out of fear, yet darkens the site where people asking for freedom live, basically. Or I don't know if we can say live, being under constant bombardment. They are hungry, they are tired, they are angry. They're living in caves, basically. As a matter of fact, one of our speakers today, Nour Adam, is in shelter in a grave. Many people are underground, even underground. Yesterday there was a distress call that came in where people underground in building, that's where the bomb is going to hit. So even in a shelter, you're not safe, and there's fear, and children are crying, and children are dying, and the story continues, unfortunately, with the international community sitting idle. Officials are having meetings. We hope these meetings get to a place. I know we've seen that in the United States, President Donald Trump has had now several conversations with Merkel of Germany, of course, with Theresa May of the United Kingdom. We're hoping some action comes from these conversations. A statement from the White House did come out yesterday stating that the Assad regime and the Russian regime must stop immediately their criminal bombardment, and so we hope something does happen. It looks like we are still trying to connect to our friends, but we're not getting the connection at this point. But hopefully we will get them on. We're going to give them a chance, of course, because they're anxious to talk to us and to tell us what they're seeing. Of course, we always like for this to be an active call where we want to hear your questions. Many of you are excellent at sending questions after the call, and so it gives us a chance to see what people want to hear. And if there are questions we can answer ourselves or right away, we will do that, of course. If there are questions for our guests, we can always send them to our guests. And when they're able to speak to us, then we can, of course, connect with them and get the answer. Now, one of the topics we discussed last week is, of course, we know the Assad regime is bombarding cities like Eastern Ghouta. Of course, there are many. These calls have been focusing on Ghouta, but we've got many other cities in Syria that are being targeted by the regime, and those are areas that basically have come out and spoken out. And, it's almost sad because when people first came out, they didn't even ask for the fall of the regime. They just wanted negotiations. They wanted to have simple rights of being able to walk down the streets and vote as they wish, not as they are expected to vote. And yet that's how the Syrian regime welcomed those talks, basically, through killing, through raping, through torturing. And then the Russian regime seemed to come to the aid of the Syrian regime in those terms, basically bombarding Syria with weapons that are unheard of. I'm not sure if you can still see me. My screen went away for a little bit here, but I'll keep talking. Alirza, if you can see me, let me know. But basically, the Russian regime came to that aid, and we saw actually President Putin of Russia give a speech last week. Of course, he's running for re-election in mid-March, and we saw him give a speech and boast about these weapons that Russia now owns that can be used in many different ways that have been tested on the Syrian people. So the Syrian people, apparently, to the Russian regime and the Assad regime, were guinea pigs where regimes can test out their weaponry. And unfortunately, we saw that it's savage weaponry. But also last week, we talked about the Iranian militia, whom we know has strong presence in Syria and appears to be building a second base. And we know that the militias have also been involved in the Eastern Ghouta besiegement, basically strangling people. And the whole point is to strangle people enough to have them give up or leave and flee, so that the regime can take over. And we did see that the regime did do some physical takeover. About 30% of Ghouta has been taken over by the regime at this point. And they are advancing, but that's what happens when people are hungry and tired and cannot defend themselves. And so we hope that something can happen so that they can at least gain some sort of life. Now, here's the amazing thing. People inside Ghouta, even with all the besiegement, even with all the limits and the limitations, are still coming out and speaking and saying, you know what, this is our country, we deserve our freedom, we will keep fighting for our freedom, we will not leave. We've seen scenarios in the past, like Aleppo last year, like other cities where things got very difficult and very tight, and negotiations of leaving and giving the land over to the regime did actually take place. And the people of Eastern Ghouta are standing strong against that. Whatever they decide, we will support. And we are with, really do hope that we get a couple of them on. We hope they're okay. Every second is scary. Every second is deadly in Eastern Ghouta right now. And so no one knows what to expect. Actually, most of our conversations lately on WhatsApp, because many of us converse inside with the activists and doctors inside Eastern Ghouta through WhatsApp. A lot of times we get messages from friends saying, gosh, I have not heard from so-and-so in hours, or I have not heard from so-and-so since this morning. And you wonder whether they're still alive or whether they have died. And it's incredible when these conversations become the normalcy of your life. And you wonder how parents cope. The scenes of the children this morning, as much as you think you can't take it anymore, you see worse scenes even, and you wonder where humanity is. But there's always light from darkness, and there are certainly many people still working and still trying to connect with people inside Syria, and the people inside Syria are resilient. So we have no cause to complain, or it would be a shame for us to in any way complain, and we have to continue the work. Hoping to hear from them soon. Okay, I'm getting a note that perhaps they might come on any second now. One of the doctors actually is trying to get on, and right before we came live, he was talking about the bombardment that was taking place right above his head at that point. So let's see. I truly appreciate that they don't give up, that they know we are a way to get their voices out, and that they, stick so strongly to wanting to speak to us. And, we ask them the same questions every week. I mean, of course, it's not the same activists every week, but we ask the same questions, and they will give us the same answer, plus give us more information, plus get even more passionate about talking to us. And so I hope we don't let them down, and I hope that we can get their messages out. Of course, we talk to all of you, but we also get the messages out through, the organizations we work with, or through individuals, to the White House, to Congress, to the European parliamentaries, to, anyone who's connected to anyone, basically. And there's more organizational work between, countries, between organizations. Of course, many people are working on the Syria issue. But with each week and each month, I think there's a little more organization and coalitions and collaboration between activists everywhere. And, I read a great quote today from a friend of mine on Facebook, and he basically said, we might all have different ways of how to handle things politically, but in the end, we all want the same thing, and that is the freedom of the Syrian people. Therefore, we're all in collaboration already. The doctor is telling us that he is trying hard to connect, but he's not able to. But let's see what we can do.
سجل رسالة صوتية مثل هذا.
عفوا. Okay. Do you think, Ali Raza, that we have a chance to get them on? Oh, we do have one of them on right now. Wasim? Wasim سامعنا؟ Okay, we might have someone on here. Wasim Al-Khatib is an activist inside غوطة. أهلا دكتور
نعم.
وسيم.
مساء الخير لكم.
مساء النور، كيف الصحة؟
تمام بخير الحمد لله.
شكرا على وجودكم معنا عند هالصباح.
شكرا لك ست سوزان.
حضرتك ناشط إعلامي ما هيك؟
نعم ناشط إعلامي، مدير مكتب المؤسسة السوري للتوثيق والنشر، ومسؤول الانتهاكات الكيميائية في دمشق وريفها.
أهلا وسهلا فيك. Everyone, I'm so happy that we have been able to connect with one of our guests this morning. It feels good that we're talking, and it looks like he's even under some light, but this is Mr. Wasim Al-Khatib. He works in the media basically and works with an organization in East Ghouta as well as an organization that focuses on chemical weapons in Damascus. طب احكي لنا أخ وسيم، حضرتك وينك هلا وشو عم تعمل وشو عم يصير عندكم؟
طبعا أنا متواجد داخل الغوطة الشرقية منذ اندلاع الحرب في سوريا. الآن الجميع ما يجري في الغوطة الشرقية من مذبحة بالطيران الحربي الروسي، وبالتالي أيضا المدفعية الثقيلة والهجوم البري الواسع الذي تتبعه قوات النظام. نحن نحاول كنشطاء دائما نقل الصورة الحقيقية والواقعية من على الأرض إلى الخارج ليعلم النظام والمجتمع الدولي ما يجري في الغوطة الشرقية عموما.
So I asked Mr. Wasim, of course, our media activist, where he is right now, what he is doing, what he's seeing. And he explained that he has been in East Ghouta since the very beginning of the conflict. And he has experienced offensives by the Russian regime, by the Syrian regime and the Iranian militias through various means, of course, through planes, through the skies, through grounds, basically all kinds of offenses. And he said, you know, him as well as colleagues, it is very important for them to stay inside Eastern Ghouta to be able to shed light on what is happening and what's going on inside. طيب أخ وسيم، هلا نحن طبعا بنعمل هالمكالمة كل أسبوع. شو تغير عنكم الأسبوع الماضي؟ شيء أنتم حابين إنه نحن نعرف عنه ونوصله للجالية اللي برا يعني شو برأيك في شيء جديد؟ هل في شيء جديد؟
طبعا الواضح للجميع الهجمة البربرية التي تتبعها قوات النظام بمشاركة قوات النخبة من قوات النجبة وأيضا حزب الله اللبناني، وأيضا هناك ميليشيات أخرى تشارك باقتحام الغوطة الشرقية. الهجوم بات بعد 7 أيام متواصلة من القصف المدفعي وأيضا الروسي المتواصل على المدنيين، وبالتالي المرحلة الأخرى كانت بعد سالية فقدت الغوطة أكثر من 4000. قليل بدأ الهجوم البري مع دخول قرار مجلس الأمن لوقف التهدئة، والتي فرضها أيضا ولم تكن بالمقابل الرئيس بوتين من الدولة 5. عفوا ما سمعت السؤال.
الصوت عم يروح. اخر شيء سمعته منك انه صار هجوم بري، والهجوم البري هو شيء جديد عليكم هلا انت عم تقول؟
طبعا الهجوم هذا اللي عم تخوضه الغوطة اليوم هو مختلف تماما عن سابقها بالكثافة النارية، بكثافة الحشود اللي عم تدخل الغوطة، وخاصة بعد دخول جيش تحرير الفلسطيني الذي بدأ مؤخرا بمشاركة ومساندة الميليشيات العراقية وحزب الله الدخول إلى الغوطة. فهذه خطوة جديدة يتبعها النظام بغض النظر عن القوات التي برفقة المدعو سهيل الحسن. المرحلة اليوم جديدة وهي من
وسيم صوتك رجع عم يقطش. خليني معلي بس أنا حأحكي اللي أنت حكيته بركي بهالوقت الصوت بيتحسن إن شاء الله. So I asked Mr. Wasim if there was anything new that he could tell us. Since we have these calls weekly, we follow the news, but what is he seeing that perhaps is new? And he said, the attacks continue to become even more barbaric. And though every week we talk about the barbarism, they become even worse.
الشرقية الشمالية سابقا
أنا أخوتي ما عم أقدر أفهم عليك، الصوت ما عم يوصلني بقى. إذا بتعطيني ثانية شوي بس بركي صوتي بيتحسن. عفوا على الإزعاج. I think we lost him. But the other thing I asked him was about the ground offenses, because he kept mentioning those, if those were newer. He just said it's just unseen the way it's happening. The ground offenses are a little bit more barbaric as well, because we're seeing militias, new groups being added to militias that are fighting. So new groups coming to the Hezbollah militias. Hezbollah and Iran, we know, are partners in this fight. So we've got the Russian regime and the Assad regime bombarding through bombs from the sky. We've got Hezbollah and Iranian militias coming in through the ground, but also new groups are being added, and those are tactics being used by the Syrian regime. And so one of the groups he mentioned was the Palestinian Freedom Brigade, which is just a new way, again, a tactic for the regime to use. The Syrian regime has for years said that they're all about the freedom of Palestine, and that they want to free Palestine, and yet they've really never done anything for us to see them bring freedom to the Palestinians. However, they use that caveat, and so it appears now they are recruiting groups that have to do with Palestine to join the Hezbollah offensive. أخ وسيم سامعنا أنت هلا؟ للأسف نحن ما عم نسمع الصوت كثير، يعني إذا سامعني الله يعطيك العافية، لأنه بنعرف إنه صعب حتى توصلوا لعنا وتجوا تحكوا معنا، فما بعرف ليش الصوت ما عم يمشي. خلينا نبدأ مرة ثانية.
هو السبب الرئيسي اللي عم يعطي تشويش
شو هو السبب الرئيسي اللي عم يعطي تشويش؟
في المنطقة.
للأسف مو مفهوم والله. على كل أنا أهم نقط يعني أخذتها منك لهلا إنه الشيء اللي عم يصير على الأرض هو إنه في
للأسف
جديدة، ميليشيات جديدة عم تنضم لميليشيات حزب الله. We lost him again, it seems. We're going to see if we can get him back on. He's very knowledgeable. He's I wish we could have heard more from him because he is trying hard to speak to us. We've spoken to this gentleman before, and he's just amazing. So much knowledge, so much energy trying to get the news out. So, and he was trying to tell me what the main reason was that we couldn't hear him, or that we were having trouble with connection, and I couldn't catch that from him, but I think he was telling us that, you know, there, just because of the conditions there, we couldn't speak. So unfortunately, this is all we could speak of today. Very important note that new militias are being recruited to work against the people of Eastern Ghouta. Can you imagine all these militias and all this weaponry against innocent civilians? Think about that for a moment. If you wonder how you can help, we have many ways to help. Looks like Kwasi might be back on. Kwasi, Samaki? No, the connection is just not working. We tried. We got some news. We'll see what might come over the next week. In the meantime, we'll continue our work. I was mentioning that there is one way to help, and that is that there's a petition going around. Perhaps we'll ask Ali Reza to get that petition out, so we can help get some signatures. But it's basically a petition asking the White House to help stop the offensive happening on the innocent civilians in Eastern Ghouta. We need to get 100,000 signatures. If we do, the White House will have to reply to us. Now, again, we said President Trump has been having many conversations, has been condemning the Russian and Syrian regime for their actions. A petition from 100,000 people would help convey that the public feels the same way, and something must be done to save the few people that are still alive in Eastern Ghouta and frankly all of Syria. Thank you so much, Ayrza, for giving us the chance to connect again. I'm sorry to our guests for them not being able to connect. We hope you are safe. We hope you're fine. We hope we do get to talk to you soon.